Welcome to another installment of our 2020 Virtual Global and Community Engagement Conference, formerly known as D80. The conference is a dialogue of celebration of our efforts to solve issues that confront the world's poorest 80%. Traditionally, it's a one-day conference featuring multiple in-person panels and breakout sessions. This year, the conference is being delivered virtually throughout the month of October, including a lecture series, a rosé gallery exhibit, a walking tour, and a series of online interviews with local and global changemakers throughout the Michigan Tech community. My name is Darnicia Slade, and I am a member of the Conference Planning Committee. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Thomas Oommen. I'm going to read his bio really quick. Thomas Oommen is, am I pronouncing that right? Oommen, right?
Yeah.
Got it right. Is a professor in the Geological and Mining Engineering and Sciences Department and the director of the Computational Science and Engineering PhD program here at Michigan Technological University. He is actively involved in undergraduate and graduate education, research, and service. He teaches the engineering geology course at Michigan Tech, has participated in over 8 million in research grants, and published over 100 peer-reviewed publications. His research focuses on utilizing remotely sensed data, machine learning algorithms, and geological knowledge to solve real-world problems that affect human health and safety. Beyond Michigan Tech, he serves as the editorial board member of the GSA and AEG joint publication, Environmental and Engineering Geoscience. He's vice chair of the ASCE Geo-Institute Engineering, Geology, and Site Characterization Committee, a member of AEG Technical Committee on the Landslides, and a member of the AGU Natural Hazards Award Committee. He is also an ABET program evaluator for the geological engineering and geology programs. He's doing a lot. So, Thomas, I'm happy to have you with us today, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Danisha. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we'll just go ahead and jump into the questions today, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So if you want to take a few minutes and tell me a little bit about your project that you're there's several projects that you're currently working on in India.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. And I am originally from India, from the southern state of Kerala. So it's always a joy for me to do things there, and I take it as a great opportunity to serve the people there. And currently, I have 3 funded projects in India, 2 funded through the Department of State, and 1 funded by a private agency called the Society for Exploration Geophysics. Let me briefly walk you through some of the projects that we have. The 2 that are funded through the Department of State, one is on developing a geohazards curriculum for disaster risk reduction in India. And in this project, we are actually working with the Tata Institute of Social Science in Mumbai. And in this effort, we actually, I have a partner in that from the US, from the University of Washington, from their urban planning department, Dr. Himanshu Grover. And together, we are working with the Tata Institute of Social Science and other universities in India. Particularly, we brought all these key players who are working in the disaster risk reduction area. and to look at what the current curriculums are in the different universities and see how that can be improved to incorporate some of the technological advancements and make it more attractive so that we can attract more students to work in these areas, because there is a huge need in India for this disaster risk reduction, and there is not enough qualified staff to work in these um, opportunities. So that was our effort. We just finished developing that curriculum. The curriculum was, the development was a 1-year process. We went through several rounds of revisions. We went through a national and an international panel reviewing it and giving us feedback. And we are just publishing that work in the coming weeks. It's just with the publisher now in the press. So we're very excited about that. The other project that we got funded from the Department of State to do is to develop a flood atlas for Kerala. Kerala is a state in the southwest of India. Flooding has been a huge issue in Kerala in the last few years. Kerala typically receives about 3,000 millimeters of rain a year. So it's a very, does get a lot of rain. And what we have seen in the recent years is that the rain is very focused, and all that rain happens in a very short time period because of the climate change thing happening. And because of that, because of this intense rain in a very short time period, there's a lot of flooding and flood damage to agriculture and infrastructure. And to address this, we are being funded by the Department of State to develop a flood atlas so that at least we can first document the areas that are highly prone to the flooding. That way, the community and the governments can utilize that information for planning in the future. Currently, there is no flood plans for the entire state. And this was, when I was looking at the conference theme, this very well fits with what we are doing. And we are trying to actually develop this atlas that would actually go into the planning and development of the state for the future. The third effort that we are doing in that state, as I mentioned before, is funded by the Society of Exploration Geophysics, Geoscientists Without Border program. And this effort, we are actually trying to reduce the landslide risk in Kerala. And again, with heavy rain, there is a lot of landslides that are happening in Kerala. In 2018 alone, in one district of Kerala, Kerala has 15 districts, but in one district of Kerala, there were about 2,300 landslides in just one district in 2018. So you can actually get a feel of the magnitude of this problem. Mm-hmm. And there is only like 5 rain gauges for that entire district, and that's very sparse for any kind of landslide risk reduction and early warning system. So through this project, we are hoping to improve that situation. We have funding for installing another 20 more. So it will be a huge increase in the density of rain gauges and the information that we can gain from that to improve the early warning systems and save lives in that community. So that's some of the efforts that we are making in India now.
That is, wow, really commendable. And I like that, your efforts alone, you're focusing on like skills, developing people, as well as developing systems that will help those communities for sure. I wanted to know more because I'm not, I don't know anything about it, but how does the atlas inform, developing this flood atlas, how does that inform the government with information? What does that do for them?
Yeah, great. So what we are hoping to do with the Flood Atlas is to be able to both model and also map what has happened in the past in terms of flooding, the
Okay.
extent of flooding, and how much inundation or what water depth floods from the flooding has occurred, or inundation depths. So what that would help is that currently the urban planning boards, they don't have flood plans and flood maps. So they are just allowing these communities to just develop into these areas. And and we, people have very short-term memory in terms of these disasters. And in a couple of years, they will all forget, and then they find that the land is so scarce and the price is so high, so they start developing in these floodplains and they start getting back to normal work in this area. And in few years, they would see that everything that they saved is just destroyed because of the flood. And we need to have proper plan. These flood plans need to be incorporated into the future planning. And that's where a flood atlas for the state would help, because we would be able to identify the floodplains and we'll be able to demarcate so that as they develop future planning, land use and land development plans, they can take that into account.
That's awesome. Okay, got it. I'll move on to the next question. Want to know how, in your words, how does your work and your projects connect with the mission of the Global and Community Engagement Conference, which is a dialogue celebrating our efforts to solve and confront the world's poor problems for the world's poorest 80%, and or this year's theme, like you mentioned a little bit, alluded to, the pursuit of social equity and representation.
Yeah, actually, I think I was looking at that conference website and the theme, and it's actually very well fits with the work that we are doing. In our efforts, we have partners in Indian universities. So there is a knowledge transfer and learning that is happening. We are involving students from the Tata Institute of Social Science and University of Kerala in these projects that we are doing. There is joint publications, and in this effort that we are doing where we are installing rain gauges, it's going to be a community effort where we are involving the government and the community partners, because we can go and install rain gauges, but they need to be maintained to be beneficial for long term. And we need the community support. So we are actually working with community partners to ensure that these are placed at the right location and they are maintained over time. And there is community participation for that. There is this efforts, what we see is that there is going to be lives saved from these efforts in terms of these landslide risk reduction. So the community is very eager to see some solution, because it is when I actually, after the 2018 rains, when I went to Idiki, I could see in their faces the fear they had for rain, and they were, because they had lost everything, their houses, their livelihood, everything was lost, and they were desperate. And we are very excited that we are able to take these solutions to them and engage them, and hopefully this would improve their lives.
Yeah. I even locally, I think about every time I hear rain, even still from the Father's Day flood, it's just like a sensation that comes over. And I wasn't at all really affected, but just the thought of, others that were affected and how it just came so fast and so hard and quickly, how it just devastated really quickly. So I can imagine, dealing with that on a more consistent basis, how that, even just from a mental health and emotional health standpoint, how that can really help those local communities for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned before, there were over 2,000 landslides. And in 2019, there was one big landslide where almost 50 people got buried and dead. And it's that whole area is living in a big trauma. So there is a lot of need, and anything that we can do to address this is going to do a lot of good for the communities. So we are very excited that we have this opportunity to do
Good.
that.
If you had to project um, 10, 15, 20 years in the future, um, and this work that you're doing, and you can take any approach with any of the three projects. I guess I would like to hear about the landslides. If we don't do something, what happens?
Well, I think what happens is that, especially in the case of landslides with this intense rainfall, we are seeing that there is more and more landslides occurring. And if we don't do planning, and if we don't do early warning, communities are going to be destroyed and their livelihoods are going to be destroyed. And not only that, um, the development that is being done in these areas, there is efforts after landslides and floods by World Bank, Asian Development Bank, all these great organizations that are coming and doing the development. And often those developments are also going to be destroyed in 5 or 10 years. And these large investments that are being made are all going in waste. So it is critical that we tackle this problem so that at least in the next 10 to 15 years, we can actually develop a sustainable community in these areas. There are community practices that need to be changed in terms of agriculture and things like that, because sometimes those contribute towards these landslide problems. There are agricultural practices there where they cut some of the slopes to improve the infiltration of water for better growth of their crop. But that is also creating problems where the ground is getting saturated and becoming heavy, and it fails in landslides. So there is not only just in the development sector, but in their daily livelihood practices needs to change. And that is critical for sustainable future in these areas.
So there's a community education component that needs to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Want to know how you got involved with this work. I love the idea of collaboration, and you mentioned University of Washington, and also how has this impacted you personally and the communities that you serve. We talked a little bit about impact to the community, but want to hear more about how this work is, I guess, turned into a passion for you and impacted you personally. I know coming from being that your home country, there's a passion automatically there with that. So any more you want to share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, I am from that area, in fact, from Kerala. So this is anything that I do there, it's just going back to home and doing things for my own community. So that's very exciting for me. And in 2015, one of the professors from University of Kerala came for a postdoctoral position with me, and this was actually funded by the India government. So he came and spent a year at Mission Tech. That really sparked a lot of collaboration and the opportunity for me to go back and do some work. Before that, I had actually not done any work in India and really not thought about some of these opportunities. But when that professor came and worked, that really helped us to think about it and do some planning. And during his 1 year stay, he actually worked on mapping all the historic landslides that occurred in Kerala to
Wow.
identify the landslide prone zones. So that was one of the efforts that we did. Um, then after he went back, we continued some of that work. And then in 2018, there was this major rain event that caused a lot of damage with floods and landslides in Kerala. And at that time, um, I approached the National Science Foundation through one of their programs called the Geotechnical Extreme Event Reconnaissance, where they provide a short funding for a team from US to go and do a reconnaissance or collect perishable data that could be lost in a couple of weeks immediately after a disaster. So with another colleague from University of Arkansas, we traveled. I traveled with him, and we went for a week to do some reconnaissance studies in Kerala and collected. And we were able to see the destruction and devastation that was there from the landslides and floods. And that really put a passion in me to do something for the state, and that the need was so evident and clear from that. And from that, we have been actually working on developing several proposals. And that's where really it started. That is, we need to do something about this. It cannot go like this. There is technology that can be used to improve lives here. So after that, I've been actually writing several proposals and working on some of these efforts. I also do some actually work as a consultant to the World Bank for some of their efforts in these South Asian countries. So it has been really, after these 2015, the postdoc, spending a year here, and after this 2018 NSF funded efforts, that I really got involved in some of the activities there.
Nice. I think it's nice to really understand the expertise that you have and what you can use to benefit other people. And I really commend you for that. So it's really powerful to hear. And I think, when you see something like that up close, to be able to go in and see that devastation, I believe it's just something in you, just like, I got to do something. You feel like you have to have some sort of response, or what can I do to help and support. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because with that NSF effort, when we went back to Kerala, there were still people buried in some of those landslides where families are still looking for them. And but it was already 6-7 days. There was no hope in finding them alive, but they were still looking. And that was very touching to see that such a sad situation that it was.
And you put yourself, I'm sure some empathy comes into play where you say, man, what if this was my family member, or,
Yeah,
a cousin?
absolutely.
Yeah, so I can imagine that. Yeah, pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So to wrap up our time, I didn't know if you had maybe one takeaway you'd like others to know about any of these initiatives, or any final thoughts you'd like to share.
Well, no, it has been like, as I said, it started in 2015, some of these efforts. So it has been, it takes time to build some of these collaborations and efforts, especially in the developing countries. It takes time for building that trust and that to work. But what I can tell is, it is worth it. And there is a lot of reward for that in terms of what you can achieve. Communities can be improved, and people are eager for that, but it takes time. So it has been a long process for us in terms of working with the government, getting their trust, building some of those relationships. It takes time, but it's worth it. That's what I can say.
Yeah, I think if you keep at it, and I think even for other professors here on campus to hear your story and your passion towards it. You know, those collaborations, any type of collaboration, even on campus, they take time and effort. But you know, to see the fruit of it, and then it can snowball into other opportunities. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
In closing, do you want to provide us with any contact information, or if there's any websites where we can go to see more about any of the projects?
Um, well, I don't have a specific website that I can actually point you to see some of the results, but my contact information is available on the department website. So Department of Geological and Mining Engineering and Sciences. If you actually look for the faculty, you can actually find me there. And we have some information on some of the projects and the students who are working on that projects there. But if you have more questions or any comments, I'll be happy to engage with you. Please send me a note.
Can you tell me one thing, Thomas, if there was something that you need to like move one of these projects forward, an expertise or donations or education? Is there something that you feel like will really help to move one of these projects forward? What would it be?
Well, there is always need for resources. We are looking for resources in terms of funding to do efforts in these countries. We will be happy to engage with donors on those efforts to see how the work that we are doing aligns with some of their interests. In terms of if there are people who would like to actually go to these countries and spend time, be it a summer or to share their expertise with communities, there would be opportunities that we can actually arrange with some of our partners there. And in doing some training programs and things for the community, which would be of great value. So there are opportunities available, and we'll be happy to engage people who are interested in that.
Is that graduate and undergraduate, or mostly like a graduate level student, or does it matter?
There are opportunities if it both undergraduate and graduate students to go and participate in some of these efforts. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for joining us for this interview. Be sure to check out all of our interviews with our change makers simply by going to mtu.edu and enter Global and Community Engagement Conference into the search tab. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a good day.
Okay, thank you, Dana.